Subcultures. Since the dawn of man, people have chosen to gather themselves into little niches and cliques, little categories and subcategories with which they can easily identify themselves. I would say that while I don't belong to any one particular subculture over any other, I do find the concept of them fascinating. I'm a bit of a modern-day anthropologist, and I think the way that people choose to categorize and define themselves is a subject that really never runs dry as far as interesting shit goes. Keep in mind, this is nowhere near a complete list, but this is just a quick little rundown of some of the subcultures I've come across over my years of personal experience and surfing the internet that I think are pretty damn cool and which you should look into more if you're looking for a particular subculture to check out or join or just dip your toes into, whatever floats your boat. Here's the 10 coolest subcultures. At number 10, we have stoners. Obviously, this is a very popular subculture here in Colorado, has been ever since the early 2010s, so it's difficult for me to imagine a time before stoners were big, and pretty much everywhere you look now, there's some guy smoking a bong or having a roach clip or puffing up a joint. And marijuana obviously really is just a highly beneficial plant, and to think that it's still illegal in most states is a disgrace to America. Colorado really was ahead of the curve when we legalized the devil's lettuce. I personally don't smoke weed, never have and never plan on doing so, but there's one thing you can't deny, which is that stoners do give off an aura of coolness and indifference, and they just kind of stand there and gaze forlornly off onto the horizon like, what you gonna do about punk? And they're pretty cool and chill, and obviously they're a lot of fun to talk to because the weed really dulls their synapses quite a bit. Their neurons are fried and they're just kind of in a catatonic fog, and they're just like, yeah man, seeing this shit, dank kush 420 bro, dank kush, raw kush. I mean, you can poke fun at them all you want, but when you get right down to it, I think it's a little mean to laugh at stoners or make too much fun of them, because most of them are just very laid back, chill people who need it medicinally or just recreationally, but it does help out with mental health issues a lot. From what I've heard, I don't use the shit, and I wouldn't recommend trying it unless you talk to like a psychiatrist first or whatever, but it seems pretty harmless, and if you want to do the dab or whatever, then nobody should be able to stop you, but I guess most of America hasn't gotten that through their thick skulls yet, even though tobacco is still fucking legal in every state. What the fuck? At number 9, we have indie web, also known as small web, DIY web, whatever you want to call it. This is a very cool subculture and speaks a lot to the forgotten ethos of the internet. Not hackers per se. You don't need to be a script kiddie or get on GitHub or any of that shit. You don't need to learn a ton of code. Just learn basic HTML and code your own website. That's what I did for my alternate reality game, the Hypnagogic Archive, to great success. You too can use a free website hosting service. I generally don't recommend the bigger ones like Wix or WordPress. I recommend NeoCities because if you want to learn how to make a pretty snazzy looking and retro looking HTML type website, that's a way to go. And you can put a guest book on there, you can put a little journal on there, you can have a radio that plays music 24/7 from a playlist that you choose. There's all kinds of cool features you can do with HTML code. really the indie web subculture speaks to the monopolization of the internet, and that there are only like 5 websites that anyone uses anymore, and I for one think that's pretty fucking lame. So there are at least 10 separate, small, independently run forums that I just check back on every now and again, post a little something epic, post a little something wacky, post a little spice of life to keep things interesting. There are a metric shit ton of forgotten forums and shit out there that you can just find right now that are just free to use, and you can sign up for them and just have a ton of fun on them. And they're moderated way better than Facebook or Reddit or Instagram or any of the big ass stupid brain clogged bullshit sites. But yeah, I definitely recommend taking a peek into what the indie web has to offer, because there's some truly insane shit. Once you step into the next couple search results on Google, instead of just clicking on the first 5, you're in for a world of surprises, because, like, believe me, delving into the smaller, more unrecognized side of the internet is a really rewarding experience, and makes you feel like you're an explorer, like Indiana Jones at the temple, you know, like you're freaking scouting out this terrain that nobody's ever seen before. Some cool fucking shit. Yeah, use your computer to its maximum potential, I guess, is the moral of the story here. Alright, number 8, we got Goth. I think Goth subculture is pretty flippin' cool. Now, while I myself cannot imagine getting a bunch of piercings and dyeing my eyes black and whatever the heck else Goth people do, I do think there is a certain suave elegance to the way that Goth people conduct themselves, a kind of interesting restraint that makes them a lot more sulkier and more mysterious and less abrasive than other subcultures. They're very fancy and very tasteful, I think is the best term I'd use to describe the Goth subculture. Goth guys and girls are generally very smooth and don't really take things too seriously, but they do fancy themselves a bit of vampires and, you know, werewolves, the kind of gothic side of things. And of course the gothic aesthetic is also in all the Tim Burton movies you like. It's in Corpse Bride and Sleepy Hollow, and you know, I know that not everyone likes Sleepy Hollow, but if you don't, you're a loser. The great Tim Burton movies have the gothic type aesthetic, and it looks pretty dang cool. And it was big in the 90s, I know, but it's still around today. If you go looking for it, you can probably find some goths hanging out at your local strip mall or down at the fountain at the park or something, you know, just kind of hanging out, being a vampire club, just sucking some blood. All things considered, it's a pretty cool and interesting history. The goth history is really layered and multifaceted, and there's a lot to it to delve into, all the goth legends and all the forefathers who kind of established it, because it really came out of nowhere. And unlike a lot of subcultures, it does kind of rely on being like old-fashioned. It's not exactly like a crazy, like newfangled, futuristic look. You know, you got to really be like, you know, cool to pull it off. I like goths. They're neat. Gothic shit is neat. Okay, at 7, we got a newer subculture, Vaporwave. Everyone knows Vaporwave. Vaporwave is one of the biggest memes on the internet, but it's not just a meme, and it's not just ironic. It's actually a growing movement, a legitimate subculture that is actually taking the internet by storm, and I think it is hands down the most promising new music genre, newish music genre. As far as like newer music genres go, Vaporwave is dead center in terms of just like productivity, pioneering, innovation. There's so many great Vaporwave albums out there that I just listen to front to back because I just like the sound of it so much. I didn't even grow up in the 90s or 80s, right? I don't even give a shit. But I just really like the production that a ton of Vaporwave artists have. Like, it's not nostalgic for me. I don't go, oh wow, you know, this is the 80s and 90s and I wasn't alive for this. I basically was, you know. It's not like growing up in the early 2000s is that different from the 90s, 80s, whatever. I just really like the production on these fucking albums. It's fucking tight. These guys, they dedicate insane amounts of effort and energy into an album that maybe gets like 35 views for members of this extremely like sheltered, closed off inner circle of people who just like take this stuff so seriously. Vaporwave fans are like freaking music archivists. They just take so much in and put so much out, and that's extremely valuable for today's internet landscape, that like we actually not only regurgitate music, because I think Vaporwave is so much more than that. It's so much more than just slowing down a song. Like, that's the laziest type of Vaporwave you can make. It actually takes like some serious production chops, and some of the best Vaporwave albums, some of my favorites, don't always even use just totally samples. Some just use like original instrumentation. There's Vaporwave albums out there that don't have samples at all. They just sound really much like, you know, like late night public broadcasting. You're just sitting there with your Arizona iced tea in your hand, and you're just watching the world move by you. The slow progression of time. Vaporwave knows how to get into your fucking brain, and that's something I really, really admire in a music genre. So kudos to Vaporwave. It also has some extremely friendly and fun participants, so if you want to get into Vaporwave, I mean, now is the time. Like, Vaporwave is the hot new genre of music currently. I know there's the meme that goes around every 3 years, oh, Vaporwave is dead. It's not actually, it's still going just as strong as it ever had, maybe more so. There's like new Vaporwave coming out every fucking day, and it's not gonna end anytime soon, so. Alright, at 6 we got punk. I can't get enough of punk. I know it looks like I don't listen to too much punk, but I listen to a fair share of punk, okay? 2 albums I recommend big time is Dead Kennedys, the one with Ronald Reagan on the front, and The Clash, Combat Rock. Both those are a good entry point to the genre, but there's so much fucking variety in punk, because at the end of the day, punk is about anti-conformity. You want us to look and act this certain way? We're not gonna do that. So there's like every so often where the Dead Kennedys will just like launch into this like random spiel that just comes out of nowhere. And that's what makes punk music one of the most innovative flippin' genres, is it's unpredictable. You don't know how it's gonna go, and it doesn't care about sounding particularly good. No punk band cares about, oh, let's really ramp up the production here. Let's make it perfect. They're just like, let's fucking jam out and just go wild. And there's something so fun and likable about that original 1980s mindset that led to the punk uprising. And I feel like it is one of the last really great like social movements of its time. During the Reagan era, it must have been an actual living hell to go through 8 solid years with a president as batshit corrupt as Ronald Reagan. So I get why the 80s were pretty much ruled by punk. It's fun to think about, and it's really, really fun to listen to. But more than that, I think, punk isn't dead. Like, punk is never gonna be dead. There's always going to be people who want to be anti-conformist and want to raise up a fuss and create a big stir, and that's what punk is all about. I really like that. I like the underlying sentiment of just unrestrained chaos and really the manifestation of ideas into reality that punk represents. It's a cool idea, and it's not only a genre of music, it's also a way of life and a philosophy. It certainly deserves way more respect than it gets from the mainstream, but for the most part, it's not so big anymore. But I do read punk zines all the time. Punks obviously really like their zines, and me being a huge fan of the medium of zines, I've read quite a few punk zines, and punks are very ahead of the time in terms of thinking about trans rights and racism and sexism and the war on drugs and all these things. You can look back in punk zines and punk literature and go like, holy shit, these guys were like way ahead of the fucking curve back in like the 90s. They knew what the fuck was up as far as the war on terror exploring drugs, everything. They were just like politically conscious on a level not many were back then. So it's very admirable being that ahead of the curve. Punk is not only a great genre of music, it's also extremely politically savvy. Alright, at number 5 we got Discordianism. Honestly, it was a toss-up between this and the Church of the Subgenius, but Discordianism gets talked about way less, and I think it's honestly the more interesting between the two. Being an atheist, I often hear from Christians and Muslims and the like who are like, "You don't like religion, Nick, you're a bigot." And I don't like Christianity or Judaism or Islam because I don't like monotheistic religions. I think that's really boring to just have one God who's just a straight white guy. But I am not opposed to all religions, like Buddhism generally. I acknowledge that most of Buddhism is fake nonsense, like that you can't have hair because hair makes you stupid or whatever. Like, I don't buy into that. But I think generally if you apply Buddhism or Taoism or something like that to your life as a philosophy rather than as a religion, it can actually be very helpful in mental health and spiritual healing and that sort of thing. And the same goes for Discordianism. Discordianism is a relatively new religion, having been brought into existence in 1963 with a pamphlet, which was kind of a proto-zine, so I definitely admire a religion whose holy text is kind of a zine type thing. That is fucking awesome right there. But the main reason Discordianism appeals to me as an atheist is kind of the same reason Wicca appeals to me, because it's much less focused on order than other religions. It's about chaos. It's about manifesting chaos and entropy and acknowledging that the universe has no set rules. Really, everything is chaotic, and the most you can do with your time is just kind of have fun with it. So Discordianism is all about that. I only found out about Discordianism thanks to a random YouTube comment I got on one of my videos, like a year ago, and I looked into it and I was like, yeah, this is a pretty fucking cool religion you got here. This is pretty fucking cool. I mean, I'm an atheist, so I know it's fake, but if you want to become a Discordianist or whatever the fuck, looks like one of the lowest bar to entry type religions there is. And within the official Discordianism theology, everyone's a pope. So there's that. Hey, there's a plus. You're a pope. I'm a pope. Everyone's a pope. I'm like, who the fuck doesn't want this? This is like the best fucking religion ever. And in terms of like being like a cult, like Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons or Scientology or whatever, I don't see Discordianism like that at all. I think Discordianism is dope as fuck. Yeah, I'm really all for it if anyone wants to be a practitioner of Discordianism. I ain't gonna stop that. Like, it sounds fucking cool. And also it's about like Discord, Eris, Greek goddess, and I'm big into the Greek shit, so there's that too. Added bonus, I freaking like Greek mythology, so you kind of got me hooked there. I do like the idea of a matriarchal religion too that worships a female goddess. I think that's very cool and forward thinking. So Discordianism is definitely a subculture you might want to check out if you're looking for a new belief system or some direction in life or a path forward. Go for it. It sounds pretty dope to me, and that's coming from an atheist who regularly shits on the Bible. So yeah. At number 4, we got cassette culture. Man oh man, am I big into this one. I own a VHS, VCR, lots of compact cassettes, a tape deck, a Walkman, a Minolta camcorder, so many appliances that are related to cassette technology, I can barely count them. I am obsessed with cassettes. The cassette subculture is also more accessible than the vinyl subculture. If you want to be big into cassettes and record your own cassette, you can set up your own home studio and make your own cassettes for substantially cheaper than it would take you to record your own record. And cassettes are cool as fuck. Passing around free cassettes makes you look like the coolest fucking guy in the room. When someone goes, holy shit, you recorded this cassette by hand and then fucking printed out the label and just made it all yourself, that's so fucking dope. It's such a boss move on your part. Cassettes will make you look like a technological innovator even if you aren't one, and the best part is the cassettes are really easy to learn how to deal with and understand the mechanisms of. They're a very fundamental technology. Also, there's just so many people who are into them. Cassettes are a very fun subculture because there's a ton of people who just dedicate themselves to extremely specific type knowledge about the models of tape decks, the types of tapes, all this specific shit. And I've definitely been there and looked into it, and I'm like, man, you know, there's just so many people having a good old fun time here. They don't care what anyone says. Oh, why don't you just listen to your music on Spotify? Nobody in the cassette subculture gives a shit because they're all too busy fucking jamming out to cassettes. But it's not just compact cassettes. You can do micro cassettes, you can do Betamax, you can do flipping high 8, you can do micro 8, you can do frickin' VHS, whatever floats your boat. There's so many cassette formats out there, and they're all fucking cool as beans, and definitely a cool place to look if you're into just like a really fun subculture that also doubles as a really nice hobby that'll take up a lot of your time and make you extremely productive, because nothing, again, is cooler than like showing up at a party, just arms full of cassettes of your own music that you've recorded yourself. It doesn't have to be music, you can record anything on tape. You can just record your fucking diary or record a book on tape or whatever the fuck you want. They're a limitless audio and video medium, and that makes them so much fun to use, is you can just like do whatever the fuck you want with them. And they're infinitely customizable. So it's great for creative people. If you're artsy, if you're craftsy, tapes are for you. Alright, real underrated subculture at number 3. That's right, it's the Yippies, founded by iconoclasts like Abby Hoffman in the late 1960s. The Yippie movement is one of the largest factions of the late 1960s countercultural movement, and I think one of the coolest fucking subcultures that ever rose to prominence in America, period. Not to be confused with hippies or yuppies. Those both sound very similar. Yippies were radical, pot-smoking, I don't give a shit leftists who were just like, we're going to clown it up as much as humanly possible, make politics into a giant laughing stock, expose the entire American political system as the farce it is. They're some of the most high-effort endeavors that have ever been committed on American soil. Like, the Yippies are just total fucking badasses. And I think Steal This Book should be, like, read in every fucking American classroom. If I had my way, it'd be on the curriculum, but instead you just read, like, Catcher in the Rye and shit. Steal This Book is a way better fucking book, and I can only imagine walking into a bookstore back in, like, 1970, seeing that on the shelf, and you're like, shit, should I steal this book, or do I pay for it? What the fuck am I supposed to do here? I want this book. Do I steal it? The book tells me to steal it, but do I pay for it? What the fuck? I can only imagine, like, the mind fuckery that created just by the title of the book alone. The Yippies have obviously by now died off, but I would argue that you're carrying on the Yippie spirit whenever you do any high-effort, anarcho kind of political thing, a big political stunt that kind of just makes a big splash, you know, gets news coverage. Like if you hang up a bunch of signs, not for any monetary incentive, but just to make a point, like, you know, a sign with it says like Trump's a dump or whatever on it. If you hang up a bunch of those, you're basically doing what the Yippies did. If you hold a big political stunt, or you like hold a mock trial or something in a public park to express your freedom of speech and your right to that, you're basically doing what the Yippies did. Their main focus was like political activism, but on a mega epic scale where you just like own the opposition via basically physical activity, not just like, you know, sitting around on Twitter, not like fucking Twitter activism, okay? These guys fucking gave a shit. They were dedicated to the cause. They didn't fuck around. Like, if there was a stunt that the Yippies were doing, it was gonna involve like 50 police just on the scene to just like tamper them down, because these guys were fucking unstoppable. If you actually read like all the Yippie pranks that they pulled, they were just fucking mad lads before that term even existed. They were like the original freaking cheeky Nandos. They just went out there, they didn't give a fuck, and all too often they're forgotten today because nobody really notices these guys existed, but they were like fucking epic. They were just like on another level of organizational perfection, where they were just able to time their stunts just right to get under the skin of the establishment. And it's a cool fucking subculture. You can obviously read about it. They're not taught in schools. You won't hear a single thing about the Yippies in any American history class, and that's just fucking insane. But they deserve way more credit than they get. Alright, at number 2 we got Riot Grrl. You might consider me putting Riot Grrl at number 2 to be cheating, because I already put punk on the list, and Riot Grrl is technically just the female equivalent of punk, but hear me out. When punk started out, this is common knowledge at this point, it kind of went through a hipster phase where people thought, well, we claim to be like against the system, but we can still be sexist and grope girls and touch them without their consent and shit. Riot Grrl was essentially a movement that said, how about don't do that? And also, girls fucking rule. So these are basically like girl punks, right? And that's like double awesome. You're girls and you're punks? Frick. This is new levels of epic right here. There's so many documentaries and shit about Riot Grrls here on YouTube, and kind of the social change they brought to the punk scene in the 1990s. They were more into zines than typical punks, which I really appreciate and respect and admire, and goddamn, I'd love to get my hands on an actual, like, original 90s Riot Grrl zine, but those are probably like crazy fucking valuable at this point. They probably go for like $100 each. And basically, Riot Grrl was symptomatic of third wave feminism and led into the modern feminism wave that we see today. Above all else, it was just about letting girls play music in a rock band, which for whatever reason throughout history has been difficult for society to accept, even though I've found on average that a lot of female rock vocalists are actually like really fucking competent and in many cases actually better than male rock vocalists, and the same goes for the female guitarists and female drum players and whatever. In terms of me putting this at number 2, I put it at number 2 because it really is just kind of an example of a subculture that's like so fucking effective, just a collective rising up against an adversary and really winning. I would argue that Riot Grrl has actually outlived like original punk. You see more female-led punk bands these days than male-led punk bands, which have kind of gone out of vogue. There are so many freaking Riot Grrl bands these days, it's hard to keep track. Meanwhile, kind of original punk has slowly died out, but like Riot Grrl is still a fucking thing. There's just like so many of these. I mean, obviously there's like female punks who don't identify as Riot Grrl. Riot Grrl is kind of a separate subculture, if you would. It's kind of its own thing where you kind of have to, you know, dedicate to certain slogans and neologisms and the like. But it's a very, very interesting thing to study because there's just so many like fucking icons of the movement who are just like, you know, fuck this male-dominated, heteronormative trash genre of punk that pretends like it's punk. We're gonna be even more punk than punk. and you're gonna get punked. Recently, the Riot Grrl movement has been extremely accepting and welcoming of trans girls and non-binary people, which is very heartening to see. So I would say that Riot Grrl is definitely a subculture to keep an eye on because it's really fucking setting the pace. And there's newer Riot Grrl bands who aren't exactly as like transgressive as the original wave, like the Regrets. Their song Monday just makes me feel shit that I don't know if I've ever felt anywhere else. And I'm not even nostalgic for the 2000s or this like vapid Los Angeles party shit, but I don't know, there's just something about the way the music is composed that just like hits different, and you're like, holy fuck, life is beautiful. It's kind of insane, actually, how competent that song is. But there's a ton of new Riot Grrl bands that you should 100% be just like checking out and keeping updated on if you want some fucking kick-ass music that just delivers a wicked blow to your senses. It's just like, wow, you know, freaking chicks rock, man, you know. Guys fucking suck. What we got? We just got like Fred Durst. Fuck that shit. So yeah, Riot Grrl is at the second spot because I just think like it's hands down one of the most effective subcultures that's ever existed. The amount of intention on display in proportion to the amount of success that Riot Grrl has experienced as a movement and as a subculture, and it's just kind of a community of women who want to lay down the fundamentals of this bold new rock frontier. It really does speak to just, you know, how great a subculture can be if you really give it time to kind of develop. Alright then, it's time for some honorable mentions. These are subcultures that for whatever reason didn't make it onto the list, but which I feel are worth mentioning given that the purpose of this video is to help you out there find a subculture you might be interested in if you're not partaking in one already. First up, we got zine culture. Zine culture is fundamentally a unique subculture unto itself, but it does overlap quite a bit with punk and Riot Grrl and a handful of other subcultures that prefer it as a means of communication. Zine culture makes full use of the printing press, one of the greatest mechanisms ever devised by humanity, which all too often is forsaken in this digital age. But zine culture is extremely radical and extremely hardcore in terms of accepting trans people and looking forward and being socially progressive generally. You'd be hard-pressed to find like a conservative zine. The only drawback is, of course, if you live in a small southern bumpkin town like Podunk out of nowhere, you're probably not going to find a very thriving zine scene. They typically only happen in cool-ass cities like Seattle or Portland or Detroit or Denver. You might not be in a very zine-heavy area, and if you're not, then zines probably aren't for you because they really only work if there's a lot of people who are willing to make systemic change via fun, interesting, really cool underground literature and the distribution thereof. But zines are definitely worth looking into as a medium because all too often they go unrecognized. A beginner's resource I would highly recommend is Stolen Sharpie Revolution by Portland zine queen Alex Reck. It's a very good introductory guide to the format as well as a nice little tribute. Alright then. Second honorable mention is BBS/Usenet. Bulletin board systems, BBS and Usenet, are both alternative forms of the internet. You might not consider this, but by definition, an internet is just a system of connected computers. So the World Wide Web, which is what most people use with HTTPS protocol, isn't the only form of internet. BBS and Usenet are both alternative types of an internet, which is weird to think about, but these are both very cool ways that you can communicate using your computer and maximize your technological literacy. IRC chat also obviously falls into this same category. Basically just anything that doesn't use the standard HTML, HTTPS type protocol and uses a more unique type technology to send messages back and forth. The cons of BBS and Usenet is that it's difficult to find a bulletin board or Usenet server with any active members. A lot of them are abandoned at this point. But a pro is that once you start using them, you'll feel like Keanu Reeves from the fucking Matrix, even if learning the ropes is a little difficult at first. Installing them and getting into them and really nailing down how to use them is much trickier than just typing in a URL. I mean, these are alternative forms of the internet we're talking about here. Very fucking cool, and it's very neat to think that they're still around and people are still using them long after their heyday in the 90s, when the internet was a much more anything goes type place and nobody knew exactly what system, Netscape Navigator or AOL or whatever would come out on top. The third honorable mention I want to give here is skater culture. Skating is cool. I personally don't own a skateboard because I have terrible coordination and my balance is ass. But there's something undeniably neat about watching an old Bam Margera video or Tony Hawk where they do those sick grinds and kick flips and they're fucking going on the fucking stair rails and shit. Man, there's just something really countercultural and epic about skateboarding culture, especially in like the late 1990s, early 2000s. Obviously, that's how Jackass started pretty much. You know, Bam Margera was in Jackass too, because all these stunts are very like life and limb, life-threatening, epic shit. And if you're able to pull one off, you feel like, man, I achieved some shit. Skateboarding is not only a show-off thing, obviously, though. It also has its practical benefits. You can get places a lot faster if you own a skateboard, and it's also insanely portable. You just carry it under your arm. You want to go somewhere, you just hop on, kick the ground a few times, and if you've got a good deck, then you're off. Like I said, I can't personally do that, but there is something really cool about just seeing some skateboarding guy or gal just zooming through the streets, and you'll earn a lot more respect on a skateboard than you will on one of those shitty electric scooters, which are basically the world's laughingstock at this point. They've infested every single American city and take virtually no actual effort or interest to ride. They're just like the McDonald's of transportation. So if you have a skateboard, if you have a fucking skateboard and you're just skating around, they'll make those electric scooter idiots look like Cheese Whiz by comparison. I mean, really, why would you pay 10 cents to some Silicon Valley tech startup for every minute you ride one of those shitty electric scooters when you could just pay $200 or so for a decent skateboard and use it literally forever and get everywhere you want to, way faster than just walking? So I certainly see the appeal of skater culture, even if I don't directly participate in it. It is fucking cool if you like look at a really great skateboarder. And there's some great like video demos in magazines, particularly, like I said, from the late 1990s, early 2000s, all about the skateboarding lifestyle, what type of boards to get, what type of wheels to get. There's a lot of technical know-how and complexity to it, and I like that. Alright, number one, I'm kind of biased with this mail order subculture. I'm really interested in subcultures that are kind of a substitute for the internet. Phone phreaking is one. Back in the day, you used to be able to call into party lines. Party lines were basically like Discord voice calls, but you used a landline and you stayed on for 5 hours until 3 a.m. Obviously, Freddy Freaker would pop in every once in a while. But given that party lines aren't really a thing anymore and phone phreaking isn't really a thing, and the internet has been monopolized and information has been centralized by a few couple mega tech conglomerates, I choose to conduct a lot of my communication via the mail. Obviously, mail art also fits into this subculture, art that is expressly designed to be sent by the mail from one party to another party and appreciated visually by the receiving party from the sending party. But mail order subculture goes so much farther than that. Anything you can possibly imagine that you can fold up, put in an envelope, and ship, you can do with the mail order subculture. The only drawback to mail order subculture is that it is hard to get into. You have to find some people who want to be your pen pals, who want to make a catalog or a distro or something with you. You have to find people who are willing to go to all this effort to actually write a physical letter, stamp it, put in the mailbox. But man, there's no greater feeling than when you get a letter from some rando halfway across the country who just wanted to reach out and say hi. God damn, that's a good feeling. And that's why Nicholas Comics, my comics business, has been running mail order purely from day one, because I think I can create a more personal connection with my clientele by sending my comics through the mail and getting letters back and forth in a nice little exchange than I can over the internet. If you communicate via the mail, your thoughts will be a lot more measured and calm and rational than if you're blasting your way across Twitter with quick little 216 character limit, or whatever the fuck the character limit on Twitter is. Just blasting short little tiny bursts that don't have any nuance or context to them. Character limits are fucking stupid. If you take the time, take an hour a night to just sit down, get your pen, write a nice heartfelt letter to someone, let them know you care, and just let them know that, you know, you're out there and you're having fun with sending letters back and forth. This is also great if you're, dealing with mental health issues. Sending shit through the mail is so much more healthy mentally than just using the internet all the time and getting angry at people, because that's all the internet really does. It is designed in a certain sense to do that. It is kind of engineered to maximize anger and not really effective communication. Mail remains the most effective possible form of correspondence. One drawback is you do have to make your address known to people who you're communicating with, or rent a P.O. box, which can be very expensive. But making your address publicly available, or at least available to a select group of people you trust with it, isn't actually anywhere near as scary as it sounds. You realize eventually that you're just someone living halfway across the country from this other person, and they don't fucking care where you live. It doesn't matter. It's not like the craziest details to know about someone. It's not their fucking social security number. All too often, people on the internet, I've found, especially, are too protective of their address. It really is just a means of contact, and it's useful to have if you want to get into the mail order subculture. It's a great subculture, and you can find a ton of cool shit. It's basically like a forum, except way more measured and way cooler, because you're like, shit, I'm the only one seeing this. This isn't on the internet. Nobody else can see this shit. All these fun-ass letters we send back and forth, it's just like personal mementos, historical documents, evidence that we were here, that we mattered, that we did something, that we said things. We had a brain, 2 legs to stand on. That's what mail order is all about. It's about leaving your mark on the world. And that's why Nicholas Comics, which to the best of my knowledge is Denver's largest and maybe only mail order comics distributor, has since 2018 been running on nothing but the mail. I don't sell my comics via the internet, and I probably never will. I either sell them through the mail or I give them out for free, just out and about. Other than that, I don't sell my comics through the internet, because I think if someone is willing to take the time to write out a nice letter, hey Nick, I really like your work, I want one of your comics. Nice letter like that, I'm like, fuck yeah, this person appreciates the finer things in life, you know what I'm saying? By engaging in this subculture, the best part is you support the United States Postal Service by paying 58 cents a stamp, or maybe 61 once this video comes out, because it increases by 2 cents per year, but that's fucking nothing. You buy a Starbucks coffee every day for $4. Surely you can pay for a fucking stamp book. That's way more of a useful investment than paying for Twitter Blue or whatever the fuck. Paying for a little check mark next to your name. Nah, don't do that, Chief. Support your governmental and civic institutions, how about? feed your mailman's family. There's a fun idea. Mail order subculture is not only cool because you feel like you're effectively communicating with real people who really want to talk to you, but you also feel like you're doing societal good as well and contributing to a useful cause that only makes society better. There's no reason not to use the mail. It's the coolest fucking thing in the world, and I'm convinced of that, and that's why I put it at number 1 as the coolest fucking subculture ever. Alright, there you have it. There's my list of what I think is kind of the 10 coolest subcultures. Did I miss some? What do you think's the 10 coolest subcultures? Like I said, I try and keep up with these type subcultures a lot. I'm way more into them than I have any right to be. I'm not even sure why I know so much about all of them. I guess it's just because it's always kind of been a fascination of mine how people choose to interact, like little ants scurrying across a Monopoly board or something. It's weird, but it's very interesting. The sociological groups that people form amongst themselves. Anyway, that's all for today's video. Hope you liked it. Hope it was fun. Hope it was an interesting romp. And until next time, sayonara, suckers.